The New Triumvirate by Conway Fitzgerald. Chapter 2. Present Day.
Marcek and Sherman Pines finally arrived back at Vosse. It was late at night, on a hot and humid summer evening. They had taken their time on the journey back, enjoying their last few hours of freedom, exploring a small crafting village south of Vosse, before returning to the city and the mundane world of the scriptorium. When they finally reached the stable within the walls of the Church of the Great Seer, it was long after dark. Marcek rang the bell as gingerly as he could. Soon after, they were confronted by the stablemaster.
"Who goes at this hour?"
The burly old man demanded.
Haberlin, it is us, Marcek and Sherman. We've returned,
said Marcek. The old man scrutinized the boys, as he did not recognize them at first. Their normally clean-shaven faces and well-kept hair was overgrown, as they both appeared to have put on a lot of weight. I had fed them quite well while they were with me. They also weren't wearing their clergy garments, choosing instead to stay cooler in the summer air in their unmarked white tunics. The stablemaster squinted at them with a look of disbelief.
"Dabbit? Pines?"
the old man asked. He recognized Dolly right away.
"My word, where have you boys been? You've been gone for weeks now,"
Haberlin said. He opened the gate to the stable and led Dolly in, pulling the small carriage. One of the young stable boys then ran off to alert the abbot that his acolytes, Sherman and Marcek, had finally returned.
"What's all this?"
Haberlin asked, observing the enormous stacks of unbound papers and other rolled-up documents that were arranged haphazardly within the bed of the carriage.
That is our notes for our report,
Sherman explained excitedly.
Wait until you hear what we've learned. We're going to be famous,
Sherman bragged.
"Did you write on all of that paper? My goodness, it looks like enough words to write 100 tomes.
The old, uneducated man replied.
It's not just words,
said Marcek.
This is the true story of the old order. Before the Starfall, we actually met a living member, a half-elven woman who was there and saw it all happen. Can you believe she's over 300 years old?
Marcek asked.
"No,
laughed the stableman.
I don't believe in any of those stories. My cousin once claimed to meet an elf in the woods. He was found to be mad. He was committed to an asylum,"
he reported sadly, before the boys could correct him and assure him of his cousin's sanity. The interior door to the church reliquary was burst open. It was Abbot Stolkren. He was undressed and disheveled, bearing a candle on a wooden holder to light his way into the stable.
"What in the known world?"
he demanded.
"Pines, Dabbit, where have you been? Why are you disturbing my rest at this ungodly hour?"
the cranky abbot complained.
Abbot Stolkren, we've just returned from our mission into the woods. It was a success. We've found Tia Aermine. This is her incredible story,
said Sherman, pointing to the stacks of parchment.
"You've been gone for weeks. We all thought you were dead. Your parents were notified that you had likely perished at the hands of woodland bandits,"
the abbot insisted. He thrust the candle above the cot, inspecting the stack of documents with incredulity. He fumbled his thin, trembling fingers through the pages.
"They tell me this story will make them famous,"
said Haberlin with a smile. Abbot Stolkren was not amused.
Unlikely for the reasons they presume.
The abbot snapped back. He then glared at his two acolytes.
The two of you must return to the reliquary at once. Clean yourselves and remove that unsightly overgrowth. The two of you look like street rabble.
Stolkren complained.
Of course, good abbot.
Marcek smiled back.
Please, allow us a few minutes to unpack these many things. As you can see, the notes for our report are quite numerous.
No. Take yourselves upstairs immediately. I will see that these notes are delivered to the governor's office in the morning.
Well, Abbot Stolkren, to do so would be premature. This is not our final report. This is just the collection of notes from the many interviews we conducted with Tia over the course of many days and weeks. Look, there's so much here we need to review. We'll need at least a few weeks to process it before we can make our final report.
Sherman countered. Stolkren was not amused by his refusal to obey.
Get yourselves up to the abbey at once. Do as I command, or I shall have you both expelled from this church. I'm certain your parents would rather learn of your death than your expulsion.
The abbot retorted forcefully. The two boys then did as they were commanded. They took only their small packs, leaving the stacks of documents in the carriage for Stolkren and the governor's men to process. They then headed up the spiral stone staircase to the 5th floor, to their shared quarters, which had not changed since the morning they left. They helped trim each other's hair back to an acceptable length, and then each spent nearly an hour removing the messy beards they had grown. All the while, they did not speak until Sherman broke the silence.
Something isn't right,
he whispered. Marcek nodded.
I have this sinking feeling in my belly that we've done something horribly wrong, brother.
Once again, Marcek seemed to agree with his notion.
The majority of our notes are in shorthand. I figured it would be a massive, time-consuming labor for us just to understand what it is we wrote. How to compose all those details and dates into legible prose and arrange the timeline. How will some unknown bureaucrat possibly make any sense out of those papers?
Sherman asked. Marcek had no answer.
What did Abbot Stolkren mean by saying he would deliver the notes? He did seem strangely angry and disinterested for a scholar of his prestige. He's always been crusty, but I admit, I'm also quite surprised at his apparent contempt for our work. Right? I thought he would be proud of what we've accomplished. Or at least what we're trying to accomplish. It's almost as if that the report was not really why we were sent there at all.
Marcek said. Sherman looked at him through the mirror they shared.
Why? Do you think?
Sherman caught on to his meaning before finishing his question.
Almost like we were sent there simply to find her, to confirm her existence. And that's all. But her story, the one they asked us to learn of, was inconsequential. Do you think that's why she sent us away so abruptly? Do you think she feels the same way?
Sherman asked anxiously.
It's late. Let's try to get some rest. In the morning, we can take this up with the abbot. He was probably just angry about being awakened after nightfall.
Marcek reassured him. After traveling all day in the hot summer sun, the boys both slept soundly, despite having been returned to their own, less comfortable beds. Each had vivid dreams of the historical image I had created for them, the profound importance of truth, and the existential need to preserve justice was in both of their minds while they dreamt, and stayed with them as they awoke, nearly simultaneously. The boys then resumed their normal routine. They wore their proper robes and reassumed their humble places. They began with morning prayers at the church, though today Abbot Stolkren was not present. Afterwards, while eating their meager breakfast with the other priests and fellow acolytes, they asked some of the other silent brothers what they had heard about the abbot missing the morning prayers. Yet no one seemed to know where the abbot was that morning. Before returning upstairs to the scriptorium, Marcek and Sherman conceived a daring plan.
Are you thinking what I am thinking?
Marcek asked.
Yes, let's do it. But let's be quick about it. We likely won't have much time,
Sherman responded. The two then made their way hastily down the stone stairs and through the halls outside the church and over to the stable house. They opened the stable door cautiously. They entered the stable and saw that Dolly, the carriage, and all their copious notes were no longer there.
Stable master,
Marcek cried out.
Haberlin, where are you?
He demanded. The grungy old man then appeared on the other side of the stable's large double doors, which led to the gatehouse and the streets of Vosse beyond.
Who's that? Oh, you two again.
Haberlin, where is Dolly? What happened to our carriage? The one we brought in last night?
Demanded Sherman.
Why, Abbot Stolkren took it with him. Early this morning. He left before sunrise. He said he had to get those documents to the governor right away.
The two gazed at the empty stable, like two sullen victims of a burglary. There was nothing they could do. Their report was gone. Wherever it was now, it was no longer theirs.
Does this mean you won't be famous, after all?
The old man laughed at them. The two boys then marched back slowly and quietly through the church hallways to the abbey, and then up the large spiral stone staircase. Neither said a word the whole way back to the scriptorium. When they entered the outer office in which they both worked, Brother Cavus looked angered by their tardiness.
Dabbit, Pines, where have you been? Have you forgotten the schedule we keep here already?
The junior priest scolded. The two made their way to their desks and sat with a look of defeat and dejection. Cavus then returned to each desk with a large stack of documents for them to transcribe.
I need 2 copies of each of these documents. Get started right away. They're of utmost importance.
A very few long days passed, and the boys were left alone with their dispirited work, aching hands, and fading memories. They would now be forced to tell it from memory alone, without the aid of their elaborate notes. They both agreed any petition for the return of their work to the abbot would be met by discipline for insubordination, if not expulsion from the church. One afternoon, as they pushed on through their hand-cramped duty, the abbot finally returned. Almost immediately, he called out for them.
Dabbit, Pines.
He summoned them in his most commanding tone. The two stood up anxiously, unsure what they might have to explain to the abbot, or worse, the governor himself. Sherman still held out a sliver of hope that perhaps they might regain their notes after the governor's people became frustrated trying to decode their notation style.
This way.
The abbot led him to his personal quarters. As they passed the doorway, Sherman overcame his intense fear and spoke.
Abbot Stolkren, can we discuss the report for the mission we were on?
As Sherman finished his sentence and entered the room, he noticed the three of them were not alone. Another man was waiting in the abbot's office. He was a stern-looking fighting man, but with the stealthy armor and clothing of a woodsman.
That is why you are here. Be seated.
The abbot instructed. Sherman was going to speak again when the abbot continued.
Captain Sloane, these are the two acolytes that were sent into the forest to Harda. Boys, this man is from the governor's command. He is an officer in the governor's cavalry. He's a captain of the Region Rangers. He is here to ask you some questions. Tell him only the truth in support of justice.
The abbot insisted.
Of course.
The boys agreed.
Abbot Stolkrand?
Sloane asked, unsure of the abbot's name. The aging priest looked to him with an approving smile.
Stolkran, yes. I am the abbot of the Church of the Great Seer. I'm also a senior scholar of the college. Could we have some privacy, please?
The ranger asked. Stolkran was quite vexed by the request.
Could you leave us, please? I need to speak with these boys. Privately.
Sloane insisted.
Why, yes. Of course. Whatever you require.
The abbot remained seated, but with a confused look on his face.
Would you like to use my office? Yes, if I may.
Sloane requested.
Of course.
Abbot Stolkran smiled at Sloane, and then gave the boys a wary look of fearful submission as he rose from his bureau and left the room. He left slowly and demonstratively, closing the door, but leaving it slightly ajar. Sloane grunted, exhibiting some lingering pain in his chest as he got up and approached the door. He leaned his gaze into the cracked door and saw Stolkran peering. The abbot then stepped back. Sloane closed the door firmly. When it was shut, and he heard Stolkran step away, Sloane began his interrogation.
I'm told that you two boys were sent by the governor to find an old woman in the forest to Harda.
Sloane began. The ranger elicited natural fear that neither acolyte anticipated. They nodded, committed to tell the truth.
I'm also told that you claim to have found her. You boys stayed in what, an elvish shanty? A hole in a tree, perhaps? Where did you stay with her in the vast woods?
Her home appeared quite small from the outside. It was covered in thick brush. But once we entered, much more space was revealed.
Marcek acknowledged with a nervous laugh.
So she had a big house in the woods that you two found using this map?
Sloane asked with an air of incredulity, motioning to the folded paper in his hand. He then unfolded a map before them. It was identical to the one that they had been given. Sloane laid it out on Stolkran's bureau.
Can you show me?
He asked innocently.
Where did you find this house?
The two boys looked to each other with weighty eyes, laden with guilt. They knew they must speak the truth. It was their duty, so they carried on.
Yes, well, the map was actually quite accurate,
Sherman said.
My compliments to the artist who rendered it.
He smiled. Sloane's expression did not change.
The key, over here.
He pointed to a meter at the map's lower left.
It details the distances quite accurately. From the start of the road here, I counted 2,436 wheel clicks for 5-foot spokes, just as it details. that is when we stopped. Though it was Marcek that noticed the trail.
Sherman motioned to his best friend. Marcek nodded.
Yes, it was a lightly beaten, northeasterly hiker's trail. But the X on the map, that is a perfect description of where the house was found.
Marcek confessed.
And you just knocked on the door, and she let you in?
Sloane asked, with a hint of sarcasm. The two boys laughed.
Yes.
They answered, then were silent. The ranger nodded in sarcastic disbelief.
My best rangers have inspected that very area thoroughly for this trail you speak of. Mind you, these are some of the best mountaineers and trackers in the known world. The interesting part is, they didn't see any trail. They never found a small house that was bigger inside.
Sloane towered over them. The two young men teared at the level of intimidation the ranger brought with his questions.
Why haven't they found this hiking trail? Or this house?
Sloane asked. The two boys seemed relieved momentarily to assume I hadn't yet been captured or killed.
It is a quite large and tangled forest, Sir Sloane.
Marcek said with a smile.
I assure you, we are telling you the truth.
When's the last time you saw Tia Aermine?
Sloane demanded.
In the morning, 4 days hence, I believe.
Said Marcek, looking over to Sherman for confirmation.
I think it's 5, actually, because we had to travel all day.
Interjected Sherman.
Yes. So, 5 days ago.
The boys agreed.
Has she contacted you since?
Sloane stared into the boy's eyes for the truth.
No.
His steely-eyed gaze did not flinch as he thought of his next line of questions.
Might I ask a question, Captain Sloane?
Sherman interrupted. The ranger smiled, amused at his audacity.
Of course.
He welcomed the boy's inquiry with a wry grin and opened hand gesture.
Why is it you're seeking her? What has she done?
Sherman asked innocently. It was then the boys learned all about the recent incident at the Black Crow Inn. They were told I was a wanted criminal, a wandering whore in disguise, and a bloodthirsty witch. I was the byproduct of a dark-hooded elvish killer and the spiritual leader of a woodland cult of zealous druids. Sloane explained to the boys how the Red had just the other day led an angry team of centaurs into Bowl to terrorize the city. Sloane explained how I had disguised myself, attacked, and killed several people. He revealed to the boys how I was a well-known career criminal. I had been robbing, deceiving, and misleading human people for over 2 centuries. Most of that was true, with the exception of the centaurs attacking innocent civilians. As far as that was concerned, nothing could be further from the truth. Though the boys already knew all that about me, as they had come to know my story quite well. I had opened my heart to them and admitted all of my many transgressions in great detail. They were not shocked by this news. In fact, they were both elated that this ranger had now confirmed it. I told them everything. That's how they knew I spoke the truth. Nothing Sloane said rung untrue to the boys until he said,
She alone is responsible for the demise of the old order. She is a vile deceiver that led them all astray.
When the 4-hour interrogation had nearly concluded, the boys' minds were numbed from the endless beating of questions from the relentless ranger's inquiry. Every time they thought it was over, He had another question, something else he needed clarity on. Then he rose and smiled at them. His tone changed to deliver a patronizing warning.
You two seem like smart young men, so I suppose you've gathered that you're both very lucky to be alive.
The two nodded innocently. Sherman then gutted out another request for the captain.
Captain Sloane? Seeing as that we've written all of our notes on the subject, we'd like to request repossession of our documents.
The ranger's expression changed for the worse.
I'll have my men examine those documents. If we need you, we will call on you,
he assured them. With that, the captain left. Moments later, Stolkren returned, and then spent another hour inquiring what Sloane had been asking of them. It was a painful and draining rehash of the stressful hours the ranger had spent on his own interrogation. When Stolkren was satisfied his position was not in danger, he ordered the boys to return to their quarters. Neither could sleep. They spoke softly while hunkered down in their cots.
If we're to understand that they knew her only as a vicious killer, what does that mean for us? They expected for her to kill us?
Marcek asked.
Are you suggesting we were meant to be human sacrifices?
Sherman gasped.
Stolkren did report us as presumed dead to our parents. You heard him.
Marcek said sadly.
It just doesn't make any sense why they asked us to research the old order. I don't understand what they were looking for. What secret were they hoping to find?
Time will unfold the truth always, and justice shall prevail, my brother,
Sherman said, quoting the Gospels they were taught. In the morning, they followed their routine quietly. After the first few hours of doing their painstaking copywriting, Sherman took a break. He pulled a large tome from inside his desk. He opened the heavy book cautiously, with one eye on the passage to the abbey. He skimmed the book he knew so well until he found the page he was looking for. He motioned for Marcek to listen to him read, ever so quietly.
Anytime the free expression of truth is being suppressed, then there is evil afoot,
Sherman said, quoting the passage from the ancient doctrine called the Tome of Wisdom. It was one of the founding scriptures of the Noble Principles, a seminal book for both the Order and the laws of Vosse.
Yes, that's Paroche, on the law that prevents penalizing someone for speaking the truth.
Marcek acknowledged.
Yes, exactly. But here, this passage at 24:19 reads, "For no man can be denied his own expression, whether spoken or writ." So this law does decree, brother, that law still exists today. It has never been denied in any court in Vosse.
So, technically, what they are doing to us, stealing and withholding our documents, is illegal.
Yes.
They both agreed in unison.
I believe Aermine,
declared Sherman.
As do I, brother. Her story is true. We know it.
Marcek asserted. When I overheard them speaking about me, I thought it best to clear my throat. The two boys looked over to the lone stone aperture in the room. It was their only window to the world, and there I was, smiling at them in the silhouette of the noonday sun.
Aermine!
They both said far too loudly. I pressed my finger to my lips and reminded them to mind what they might say out loud. I raised one hand to them and glared a face of warning as I looked towards the hall to the abbey. The boys were completely silent. They had so much they wanted to say, but could not. I found it amusing watching them struggle with this for a moment. Then I waved for them to come to me by the window. They both opened their mouths and started whispering as I began my diminution incantation. Before the boys could finish their sentences, they had been reduced in size to that of a small feather. In one swift motion, I collected them both as they fell towards the ground and then tossed them into my endless bag of holding. I then polymorphed back into an eagle and flew off towards the dense woods to the east. While in my bag, the boys had their first metaphysical magic experience. I had told them quite extensively about the many magic spells I had mastered, and even some of those I hadn't yet knew of. They had seen me create illusions, and also witnessed a magic light once, but I never used any magic on them until now. The two were spiraling through endless time and space, floating weightlessly like stardust. They witnessed before them a seeming endless galaxy of items I had stored within. There were artifacts, statuettes, scrolls, magic items, weapons, tools, gold, and silver coins of all types, and countless other treasures. Amid the floating myriad was the large birdhouse I had constructed so many years ago, when I still raised giant hawks and griffins as a hobby. The two boys saw Fey Haerslet, the pixie, riding atop the birdhouse. She looked both bored and angry as she floated by weightlessly. She was seated atop the house with a frown, her legs folded and her tiny fist pressed to her chin. The boys understood right away she was not happy about being inside the bag. Later, the two saw what looked like a hole in the bag. There was magic dust and other items being drawn to it. They floated closer and witnessed a black-tone amulet, which appeared to be cutting a hole in the fabric of the bag. It was drawing them in with foreboding power. As they came closer, they noticed many items near it had lost their magic luster. The nearby items floated like dead bodies, frozen in the cold, dark vacuum of space. When they attempted to retreat, they found the black stone only drew them closer. They could not escape its pull. They were drifting ever closer to the bursting seam of darkness in the bag. They could not speak, though each feared being drawn into the dark hole with complete uncertainty where that fissure might take them next. Yet before they endured such a horrific fate, I reached into the bag to retrieve them. Fey Haerslet was clever and leapt deftly onto Marcek's back as I scooped him out of the bag. I placed them on the ground and then restored them to their normal size. That is when I saw Fey Haerslet had escaped. She flew above me like an angry, menacing bumblebee. Why did you do that? I told you, I didn't want to go in there. A small tear that appeared like a tiny diamond shined out of her left eye as she signed her intense displeasure to me. Oh, Fey Haerslet, don't be so dramatic. You were never in any danger. Me, on the other hand, yeesh, I complained, having just survived an attack by the shallow ditch 2 nights before. The two boys had a scared yet blissful look about them as they watched this strange argument unfold. I was angry, but I was patient with you. Then you put that evil rock in there. It nearly killed me. It's pure evil. Why did you do that? The tiny pixie cried out in sign. What evil rock? I asked.
Oh, yes. We saw it too,
Said Marcek.
There is something in there.
Sherman said.
Well, wherever it was we all were. It seems to be quite powerful. And yes, very dark. I concur. It was quite evil.
It was then I thought of the amulet I had taken from Macy. I reached into the bag and took it out. Is this what you're talking about? I asked. The boys nodded. As I showed it to Fey Haerslet, she seemed to have an instant adverse reaction to it, like it was hurting her physically. She fainted and fell like a seedling to the forest floor. Oh, I'm sorry, old friend. I didn't know it would... I put the amulet back in the bag. The Fey then got up off the ground and flew up to my face, her little eyes filled with shining tears. She slapped each of my cheeks with her tiny pixie hands. I must say, even though she caused me no physical damage, I have rarely been so hurt, emotionally. How could you possess such evil? Why? The pixie demanded. I tried to explain a week's worth of intrigue in a matter of tense moments, but I failed miserably. It was on the Breen girl. Well, the one who showed up. I didn't know what it was. The Fae had had enough of me for that day. She flew off into the woods faster than I'd seen her go in many years. I then exhaled with exasperation.
Miss Tia, what's going on? What are you... Why are we here?
For the first time since they first knocked on my door, Marcek and Sherman exhibited fear towards me. I had to reassure them and find out what I had come to discover. But before I could speak, the two started bombarding me with their concerns.
Tia, the governor's rangers are after you,
said Marcek. Yes, I know. That was a fact of life I had lived with for 140 years now.
They knew exactly where your house was. They had the same map we did. But for some reason, he said, they couldn't find the house.
Marcek grinned. I simply nodded. Where are your documents? I asked. The two looked at each other again, this time with a saddened look of powerlessness.
Tia, they stole all our notes. The abbot took them to the governor early in the morning, just after we arrived.
Sherman confessed.
We think we may have a legal case to get them back.
He consoled. I figured that would have happened, though I hoped I'd still have a chance to confiscate certain pages. I was fearful of revealing too much about Nuna and the Druids. The Wood Elves were very private people, and now they were on the verge of extinction. Who was it that questioned you? I asked.
A captain in the governor's cavalry. His name was Sloane.
Marcek reported.
Yes, he told us what happened at the Black Crow Inn.
Sherman said. Did he now? Well, perhaps sometime I'll tell you what really happened there that night.
Miss Tia, Aermine, we believe you. We believe in your story. We believe it is the truth,
Marcek said. Sherman nodded in agreement. Looking into their innocent faces, I nearly cried. Well, I appreciate your faith in my intentions. I'm glad at least the two of you can discern fact from fiction. Unfortunately, it seems the rest of humanity are satisfied to believe whatever it is that empowers them. The boys acknowledged my assessment. I've caused you both enough trouble already. I'm going to return you home now. But first, I'm going to need to put you in my pocket. I pointed to a large pocket inside my leather vest. Please, don't try to get out. You might just fall to your death. They looked scared for a moment as I shrank them again. I made them even smaller than before, so I could tuck them into my vest like a couple of coins. I then flew back invisibly to Vosse, to the 5th floor tower in which they toiled. I then pulled them out of my vest as I looked into their scriptorium, checking to ensure no other eyes were present. I then dispelled the magic as I tossed them gently into the room. The boys spilled out onto the floor, one on top of the other, like a couple of rolled dice. Restored and safely relocated to their workplace, they both felt safe again. Thank you, both of you. I wish you well, I said softly.
Tia, will we see you again?
Asked Sherman. Perhaps. I smiled sadly. I waved goodbye, and then leapt out of the small window.
Thanks so much for watching, everyone. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and ring the bell for notifications so you never miss an episode. Be sure to smash that like button and comment below. It helps a lot. If you'd like to help me get this book published, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter. And as always, be sure to share this story with all of your friends on your favorite social media.